Well, I title this presentation, We Are Not Them, Christian Zionism, Geopolitics and Public Theologies, a Latin American Perspective. In last February, a protest was held in Sao Paulo, Brazil, against the government of current President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, promoted by supporters of former President Jair Bolsonaro. One of the striking notes of the mobilization that called the attention of media was the presence of protesters, like this one, with the flag of Israel. In a video from a platform, Media Ninja journalist asked to one of the protesters why she was carrying, in the form of a cape, the flags of Israel and Brazil. Because Israel is Christian, like Brazil, she answered. With some surprise, the journalist replied that Israel is not a Christian nation. But the lady insisted and answered, but they represent us. We are not communist. Israel is with us. An end quote. This last sentence that may seem illogical, however, it summarized the theological political dimension behind the increasingly common evocation of Israel in various popular manifestations and political discourses in Latin America. And this is what I want to develop in my very short presentation, on how Zionist discourses, especially Christian Zionism, permeates Latin American society through the action of neoconservative evangelical groups and acts as a counter-political position to construct new hegemonies. In this case, Christian Zionism acts as a theological framework of public advocacy that sustains at the same time a political agenda within the continent and from there legitimize the imperialist action over Palestine. On the phenomenon of the use of Zionist symbols and discourses, I would like to highlight just two elements that I mentioned here. On the one hand, it represents the expression of a theological, religious, political content that mix different signifiers in tension. At times, it is difficult to identify if we are in front of a religious discourse that legitimizes political ideology, or if it is a political discourse masked as religion. In these narratives, the borders between the religious and the political becomes blurring, resignifying meanings of all kinds, such as the idea of Israel, communism, democracy, the religious itself. On the other hand, the evocation of Israel responds to a logic of antagonism and differentiation. Israel is a signifier, embraces a set of political ideas, the true democracy, the alignment with the West, and religious ideas, like the idea of chosen people, the founding epicenter of Christian morality, the messianic promise in the face of the end of times. Such signifiers serve as an antagonic positioning vis-a-vis other articulating signifiers, namely communism, atheism, anti-Semitism, immorality, anti-family, gender ideology. The several studies agree that the history of Christian Zionism in Latin America sinks its roots in the arrival of North American missions at the beginning of the 20th century. These organizations were successors of the so-called revivalist movement in the United States at the end of the 19th century, which promoted a reactionary Christian discourse with strong moral as well as messianic imprint. The various North American missions that arrived after 1920 responded to the idea of the so-called manifest destiny from the conjunction between the U.S. imperialism and an instrumentalization of Old Testament promises applied to the myth of the eternal return from the concept of the Holy Land. We talk of narratives that had a major impact on the imperial policies deployed in the Middle East after the First World War. It is here where we can see an emerging way of how Christian Zionism and North American evangelical groups operated from a geopolitical agenda since the beginning of the arrival of Protestantism in the region during the 20th century. This influence mutated over the decades and it intensified, from my perspective, from the 1980s onwards. I don't have time to describe it, but I simply indicate that during this time, a set of theological, missiological, and ecclesiological discourses were promoted, such as the megachurch model, the theology of the spiritual warfare, or the missiology of the 1040 window, which respond to the US Zionist theology developed during the Cold War and became naturalized within Latin American evangelical identity since that decade. Basically, these theological approaches proposed a demonization of Islam and indigenous peoples, as well as a rescue of Jewish rituality as a way of redefining faith, ecclesiology, and later on, political itself. If we move forward into the Latin American political arena, references to Israel has increased significantly in the recent decades. Case studies on the subject refer to Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Venezuela, Guatemala, Mexico, among others. The most emblematic recent cases are those of President Javier Milei in Argentina, who claims to be close to Judaism and uses Jewish references to describe his activism and political discourse. Brazil is another emblematic case where we do not only see the instrumentalization of Christian Zionism in the case of Jair Bolsonaro, but also a broader cultural and political presence, such as a constant Zionist references of evangelical congressmen in their speeches. Local studies on these cases raises some important issues to be taken into account. On the one hand, Zionist references are used to establish an antagonistic position vis-a-vis the political class and its traditional liberalism, as in the case of Milei, who, in the words of the Argentine sociologist Damián Satón, uses Zionist narrative to highlight his prophetic place as a confrontation to the monarchy represented by the caste, as he says, the political class, and the state. On the other hand, in the case of Brazil, Christian Zionism acts as a colonial device of differentiation. As the Brazilian anthropologist Rodrigo Tognol argues, the ritualization of using Israel flags in manifestation and references in political discourses are part of what he called a process of whitening, which aims to articulate three sociopolitical elements: whitening as a class distinction, saving as a messianic designation to evangelical groups, and nationalizing, invoking the principle of nationalism from Israel as an ideal type. But I would like to highlight an example in Mexico, and I'm referring to the pastor Gilberto Rocha from the Centro Cristiano Calacuaya. Sorry, it's difficult even in Spanish to pronounce. This church, which has more than 30,000 members, has Mexican and Israeli flags exhibited throughout the church. One of the events that made public the image of Pastor Rocha was his trip to Israel in 2017, along with a group of pastors invited by the minister Benjamin Netanyahu himself. In an interview given to Enlace Judío, the Jewish link, Pastor Rocha shared about the experience, and when he was asked why Netanyahu invited them, the pastor stated the following, and I mentioned there. He told us that Jewish people are described in the Bible, in the book of Isaiah, as the light to the nations, and that the state of Israel wants to fulfill that mission. When we were with the Prime Minister, Netanyahu, in December, he told us that the main purpose of the meeting was to heal relations between the State of Israel and Latin America. We asked him why we were invited if we were not politicians, and he replied, "I believe that evangelical church can be the actor to heal that relationship. The politicians of your countries do not know the history of Israel, but you know the past, present, and future history of Israel, as well as its prophecies. So, I invite you to be the link with your governments to change the attitude of your countries towards Israel." And end quote. This is public, yeah? This is... So Rocha's description of the meeting, between Netanyahu and the group of evangelical leaders illuminates us about the type of advocacy of Christian Zionism in the region. This acts both as a theological, religious, political framework of the new public face of neoconservative evangelical groups, as well as a type of political religious discourse that enables different types of articulation, whether with international organizations or with other religions, governments, and social movements. It is worth mentioning that Pastor Rocha, that I didn't point him, he's right there in the left side, close to the flag. It is worth mentioning that Pastor Rocha is one of the most representative actors in the region of the work of evangelical communities within the inter-American system. Based on this analysis, based on what has been analyzed, I asked myself the following question: why does Christian Zionism reach such a capacity of catalyzation and articulation? To leave the answer in a perspective of simple imposition of group of power and influence on media or in certain political pragmatism should fall into a certain analytical reductionism. Rather, we could affirm that the effectiveness of Christian Zionism resides in having transformed itself into a public theology that make it possible to counter meaning and link spaces in comprehensive and effective manner. In the face of the representative crisis of traditional political discourses, conservative and progressive, from the right to the left, and their respective theological religious platform, especially within Latin American Catholicism. From here, I also ask, how can we build a contesting public theology that enables new socio-anthropological cosmovision and platforms for political advocacy? What processes of theological redefinition and socio-political formation do we need? How do we create new agonisms, which is not the same as antagonisms, following Chantal Mouffe, to counteract the hegemony intended by Christian Zionism? So, following these lines, we can identify two characteristics of this Christian and Zionist public theology that need to be contested. First, Christian Zionism operates as a colonial public theology that dehumanizes the human from a radicalization of a moral purism. Joseph Massaf and Mitri Raheb, among other analysts, argues that post-colonial theory has fallen short in its postulates when it comes to understanding the impact of Israel's settlement colonialism in Palestine. We speak of a time of colonialism that is based, following Frantz Fanon, on colonial bodies as son of non-being, as bodies of discarding, which do not deserve to be considered as individuals or as being assignable to any type of collective. They are rather bodies of the dregs that, as Edward Said said, are the target of a redemptive occupation for the transformation or eradication of their perverse moral condition. Feminist philosopher Ollira Molino expand this argument, suggesting how the modern exercise of geographic cartography implied a cultural cartography. Such mapping relates to the mapping of bodies. This mapping of bodies is what we see today in Gaza, where the obliteration of the borders of settlement colonialism not only responds to the expansionist thirst from the State of Israel and Western imperialism, but also to a moral and redemptive geopolitics under an eschatological vision of restoration of a racialized origin as the legitimation to eliminate dissident bodies, socially, racially, culturally, and sexually speaking. This is the same logic of coloniality over bodies. This is the one that operates beyond Christian Zionism in Latin America as a political and moral device of the neoconservative groups. A coloniality that mutates geopolitical territory into a territoriality over bodies through the eschatological moral legitimation of the conquest as a theological promise. The redemption behind the warlike conquest of the land is the moral redemption behind the political conquest of bodies. A colonialism of settlement that is transformed into a moral settlement over corporalities. The promotion of politics of bodies within neoconservative evangelical agenda is linked to the moral purification behind the myth of the Zionist origin. It is the theology at the background of the promotion of anti-feminism, anti-LGBTQ+, anti-indigenous peoples and minorities of all kinds. The colonialism of settlement over the colonized bodies of Palestine acts as a geopolitical symptom for a moral colonialism that sustains its political agenda in different countries and multilateral organizations. At the same time, this moral colonial policy pursued by neoconservative evangelical groups also acts as a bias for the justification of the war and genocidal enterprise in Gaza, as inevitable part of an unnecessary element in the same redemptive enterprise of the world, as we see in a lot of speeches in pastors and religious leaders in Latin America. The second characteristic of Christian Zionism is that it is based on an anti-utopian eschatology. Here I refer to the phenomenon raised by Franz Hinke-Lammert, which calls the problem of captivity of utopias. Hinke-Lammert argues that modern and secularized society cannot be sacralized except through utopia. By undermining utopia, the modern worldview itself is undermined in its ontological condition, its materiality, and its historical projection. Modern social systems and their imaginaries are institutionalized and reified utopias, says Hinke-Lammert. As we have seen, Christian Zionism, together with the ultra-right voices in the region, try to reconstruct this modern utopia, but evoking actually an anti-utopia that drains of redemption and liberation. It refers to the idea of disaster, inevitable conflict. Okay, I'm finishing just one paragraph. The need to return to a pure origin. The utopia is, in the end, the rising of the status quo of conservative imperial politics. To conclude, we can say that counter-reaction to the growth of Christian Zionism as a political device implies both work of theological critique and as well constructing an alternative platforms of religious advocacy in public space to contest these naturalized meanings. Christian Zionism is based on a moral immanentism that co-opts anthropological potential for its colonial control and abolishes all dignity by emptying bodies of transcendence. The utopia that it claims is nothing more than teleological, fatalistic, and metaphysical vision of history. That's Victoria, is connected with your presentation of time. That is really important. Which blocks any possibility of movement, of liberation, of genuine redemption. We see finally that it operates through a reactive politics that even pretends to correct the sense of revolution and disruption. And just last sentence. In other words, Christian Zionism and its relationship with the ultra-right has reappropriated the founding terms of critical tradition that we need to recuperate. Here lies one of the most important tasks we have. How do we recover these meanings from a critical point of view towards a promotion of new anthropologies, new political practice? And here I recall again Franz Hinke-Lammert's idea overcoming what he called abstract universalism toward a practical universalism based on an utopian transcendental imagination. Hinke-Lammert said that modernity uses transcendental concepts as a way of reifying social relations. On the other hand, transcendental imagination starts from subjects in relations, from a theological practice of dialogue. In the face of political theologies that legitimize terror, genocide, and death in the name of God, we need transcendental imagination of a trans-immanent theology that promotes collective work for an alternative immanence that signifies the dominant immanence. Thank you.